¡Que viva Pedro Sanchez!
So let's talk about the current situation over in Spain, because as you probably saw going all around social media today, some 80,000 approximately African migrants, as you can see in these crazy scenes right here, flooded into the Spanish region of Ceuta in a single day. The military had to eventually be deployed, although they've effectively been given stand-down orders by the left-wing Spanish government. And so now we have a insane migrant situation going on. These are basically all fighting age men. They're storming in. They don't exactly look like refugees to me. And folks, on one hand, sure, this is absolutely a conversation about illegal migration. We covered earlier in the year how the left-wing Spanish president, Pedro Sanchez, granted amnesty to some 1 million illegal migrants in the country. And as we pointed out at the time, and we've said over and over again, this is why you cannot do amnesty. This is why only a zero-tolerance policy works in any Western country to stop illegal migration. Because guess what, folks? You now incentivize that very migration, and there it is happening right in front of your eyes. The same thing happened in the United States, but we still have some people who believe in the name of compassion or something that amnesty is a good idea. So just understand, first of all, if you support amnesty, this scene right here is what you're supporting. There's no way around it. When you create an incentive structure for illegal migration, don't be surprised when nearly 100,000 people flood into a tiny enclave of your country in a single day and completely overwhelm the place. But it doesn't stop there, because arguably, I think the part that a lot of people are missing is that this is a bigger conversation than just illegal migration. This is a hostile invasion by Morocco of Spain. That is effectively what you just watched. This is indeed an act of war. Why do we say that? Because, ladies and gentlemen, 80,000 Moroccans don't just randomly gather and cross their border into Spain's border in a single day without some type of government approval. There's rampant evidence that that happened. And so in many ways, you're not just witnessing a migrant caravan or a migrant crisis. No, we just watched a 13th century war break out once again, where Morocco is intentionally invading a part of Spain that they historically claimed should be theirs, okay? And because of third world resentment against the first world, against the Western world, this is what they're doing. And I feel like we need to discuss that aspect of it as well. I understand that very often we talk about the third world or Islamic invasion of the West, and that's just meant for the purposes of political rhetoric. But please understand, I'm not using that as a form of rhetoric. I mean that literally. This is an act of war. Europe should treat it as such, although we know they will not, but we'll talk about what's going on over here. And by the way, again, that cautionary tale of this is what amnesty does, okay? And if you directionally are, for example, against ICE, against the deportation operations of America, you're against Trump, frankly, for whatever freaking political reason you want to choose, or you are sympathetic to the Biden years, this is literally what you support, okay? These scenes, although they're crazy, I feel like I've seen them before. And let's not forget that. So let's talk about it, guys. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. That is the best way to support our work, and it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And that said, again, how does amnesty work? What does it do? It's a basic incentive structure. When you say to illegal migrants that, hey, we're giving you a pass, this is okay, what you get is more illegal migration. And that's not much of a big, gigantic mystery. Even if you want to say the amnesties for these people specifically, if there is a belief that if, hey, enough of you flood into the country, the government will show quote unquote compassion, then of course that creates the incentive structure for more illegal migration. Folks, this is exactly what happened in America during the 1980s. And I still get into arguments sometimes with even more milquetoast Republicans about this stuff, about, hey, maybe we should give a break, maybe not a path to citizenship, but an amnesty for people who've been here a long time. Folks, the United States of America already tried that, okay? And now Spain is learning the same exact lesson, because this is what happens to first world Western countries when they show so-called quote-unquote compassion to the invasion of their countries. In the 1980s, you may recall the big promise, the bipartisan basis on which that amnesty law was passed and signed, sadly, by President Reagan, was that we'll give the amnesty to the ones here, but we're going to increase border security. So we're going to solve illegal immigration all at once. And then what happened? Well, through the 90s, through the 2000s, through even up to a couple of years ago, you remember illegal migration only greatly increased into the United States, and all Republican promises at the time that it would result in more secure borders completely fell apart because, again, why? You're incentivizing more illegal migration. And by the way, once leftists figure out too that they have a path to greater political support and the breakdown, the destruction of national identity, the destruction of society, which is their ultimate goal, of course, they're going to be pushing more of this. So that's the lesson that America learned in the past. If you thought that was a one-off example, and this is not, again, what happens every single time you do any form of amnesty, look at the current situation in Spain just a couple of months after.
Wild video here, chaos at the border of Spain's North African enclave in Morocco. This is a city called Ceuta. You're watching as thousands of migrants break through the fence and completely overwhelm the border police. Their video showing huge groups of people, mostly young military-age guys, cramming into inflatable tubes or arriving on shore another way, some of them wading in the water as they break through the gates to get to the other side. Sandra, this is reminiscent of kind of what we saw during the open border during the Biden administration through 2021, 2024, kind of similar to what we saw in Del Rio back in 2021. The Socialist agenda, their platform literally says they want to abolish borders, abolish immigration enforcement, have complete freedom of movement. This is what it looks like in another country if they get what they want. Notice there is no resistance from the government whatsoever. These people are coming in without any obstruction. And if people don't know, Spain has a very left-wing government. Earlier this year, they did a big amnesty program for over 1 million illegal immigrants living in the country. They had 1.3 million illegal immigrants apply for that amnesty program between April and June. So that's what we call a pull factor, Sandra. They're looking for something like that. They know if they can just get their foot in the country, maybe someday that left-wing government will do another amnesty program. And you were just reading some of the wires. The locals want an emergency declaration. It sounds like
the ministry's saying no, they will not deploy military to the border.
Apparently they don't think this is an I mean, look at this. This is a total free-for-all.
It does feel like we are looking at a few years ago when you were reporting at the border here in the United States. Dios mío de mi vida.
Yeah, so as you can clearly see, it's an insane scene to witness. It looks like something out of, I don't know, an apocalypse movie or something like that. These individuals don't exactly appear to be refugees, given the fact that they're fighting-age men, and many of them don't even seem to be really poor necessarily, but of course, that's what communists are going to spin that and say, oh, these are people just fleeing Morocco, seeking a better life, because, I don't know, Morocco is a dangerous country. Morocco is a war-torn country. Not even true, by the way, you know, but okay. Of course, you see the migrants themselves pretty explicitly thanking Pedro Sanchez, the president/prime minister of Spain. So if there was any doubt as to why this is happening, yes, his amnesty policy is partially at least to blame. That's the incentive structure. We'll talk about the other side from Morocco as to why this is happening. But yeah, they're saying that themselves. You can see the military has finally been deployed, but they're basically being given stand-down orders as expected, not really doing anything. The national government is, at this moment, still rejecting calls from the city itself to declare a national emergency. In other words, what is going on here? The communists in charge are effectively surrendering this city to a bunch of Islamic invaders. Could you imagine telling Spanish people back in 1492 as they're finishing the Reconquista, taking Granada back for the indigenous people of Spain, not Islamic imperialists and invaders who conquered that place, that, you know, in the year 2026, the government, even though it has the resources, is going to voluntarily allow these people to invade you again. You know, it's just utterly insane to even think about, and kind of sad, right? What's happened to the West. But here's the part of the story I think a lot of the reporting on this is missing, is that, folks, this is a lot more than just some random migrant crisis that popped up. This is an intentional act by Morocco, and honestly on behalf of the entire Islamic world. Part of the reason we say that, for example, is because numerous videos out of Morocco itself seem to indeed show Moroccan authorities not doing anything, obviously, to protect their own borders. In fact, not only are they standing aside, in some cases, actively aiding the migrant caravan into Spain. And how are we supposed to interpret that? Well, first take a look at some of this. Yeah, so this is intentional, and maybe you see why I'm starting to say this is an act of war, not just some random migrant or immigration issue. It's a lot deeper than that. And that idea is compounded when you understand where this is taking place. So Ceuta, however you want to pronounce it, is not actually in mainland Spain, just to be clear. It's a small Spanish enclave on the African continent, basically bordering next to Morocco, as you can see right here in this picture, right? So this is the Iberian Peninsula. That's Morocco down here. Now, obviously, this is a place historically that Morocco kind of claims should be theirs, even though it's a historically Spanish settlement. The population of that place regularly reasserts, it's sort of similar to the Falklands issue, right, or Gibraltar even, that they want to be Spanish. But so effectively so understanding that though, right? And the Moroccan authorities basically aided this happening. They said, hey, go invade Ceuta. And by the way, you're looking at fighting age men here going on, right? Videos themselves, reports from locals on the ground seem to suggest they're not poor refugees, they're fighting age men. But even on top of that, widespread speculation. Many of them are even leaving Morocco because of the crimes they committed there. I saw a video earlier of someone literally saying, yeah, I'm leaving from Morocco because I killed someone and I can't stay there. Okay, we know how this stuff goes, by the way. Look how Tren de Aragua, for example, the famous Venezuelan gang, got into the United States. That was sponsored by Maduro because they're effectively kicking out their worst of the worst, most violent people into Europe. But of course, why would that be happening? Because, this is kind of the byproduct of third world resentful ideology, right? From the Moroccan perspective, what they believe is, Spain are the colonizers, they're the imperialists, this is our land. And so please understand, they're literally sending their most violent fighting age men into Spain, and in specifically this part of Spain that they believe should be theirs, in order to guess what? What do you think is going to happen next to the residents, right? Unfortunately, but this is true, okay? You're talking about people who already resent the population that actually lives there and they're violent. How else is this supposed to be interpreted, right? Now, Morocco is intentionally sending the most violent individuals, hoping that they'll somehow kill the quote-unquote Spanish imperialists, which is, of course, highly ironic to be hearing that coming from the Islamic world, who spent about 1,000 years imperializing, colonizing, and trying to occupy the Iberian Peninsula. But, we kind of know how the jihads tend to operate, right? They cry out in pain as they strike you. They'll start a war, and then when they lose the war, they claim it's imperialism or genocide. We've seen this type of cycle time and time again. But, make no mistake about it. That's actually what's going on here, right? It's, we've seen the migrant crisis happening for a long time in Europe, and you could argue that's been the goal this entire time, but not thus far has it been, I would argue, this deliberately on the nose. So make no mistake about it. It's not just a bunch of illegal migrants invaded Europe today. Morocco, the Islamic world, Islamic countries just invaded Europe in a cycle, I don't know. We kind of saw that happen thousands of years ago, but here they are doing it again, right? Like a jihad is now happening at a wide government scale on European territory, but of course, as we probably expect, it won't be treated as such, right? Wait about 2 seconds from now when leftists try to recreate the totally insane scene you're seeing today as, that's just, the poor refugees, women and children, guys. They had to flee from violence in Morocco. What violence in Morocco, by the way? There's no war going on there. I don't even think these people are from Western Sahara, frankly. They're from Morocco proper. So what are you even talking about, right? And by the way, I think it's also worth noting, too, The Spanish left-wing government, folks, has given hundreds of millions of euros in foreign aid to Morocco, okay? They've been incredibly charitable. They do nonstop apology tours trying to say to Morocco, oh, we're sorry or whatever, right? Notice how you're repaid. And I think that's another key point to bring up as well, because we so often hear the leftist excuse is that, oh, there wouldn't be illegal migration if we address so-called root causes. Remember Kamala said that, but she's far from the only one. This has historically been the left-wing narrative. Oh, if Western imperialists stopped being so mean to the third world would stop sending its people, right? As if, again, like this war hasn't been going on for thousands of years, and actually Christian Europe did not start it. Correct the historical record there. They did not, right? But still, regardless, what is that usually used as a pretext for? That's why we need to give more foreign aid to the third world. That's why we need USAID and all these types of like charity programs, because we're trying to stop the root causes of migration vaguely. Well, notice how you do that, and, does Morocco pay it back? Are they thankful for it, or do they instead respond by, how do they use their compassion, your compassion, right? Do they take that and be grateful and treat you well because of that? Or do they understand, oh, you're a sucker, you're a loser, and like the vultures that they are, they basically pounce on it, totally take advantage, and here you go. Let's send a bunch of violent criminals and murderers to your territory, because effectively this is a reverse reconquista going on, right? This is an Islamic invasion, like very literally, okay? That's the plan. Make no mistake about it, right? You mean to tell me, too, the goal here is not eventually to flood Ceuta with so many Moroccans that basically the place becomes Moroccan and then Morocco has a greater pretext to annex it? This is historically a tactic used in these types of border disputes, is you either engage in ethnic cleansing or reverse ethnic cleansing, where you flood basically that place with a bunch of your people, so that way it's a pretext to either invade or do an independence referendum and rig it or whatever, right? We've seen that happen in Eastern Europe, for example, Russia and Ukraine, that's a thing that took place, right? Russia kind of spends a decade settling some of its people in Eastern Ukraine, although Russians already did live there too, right? But that sort of ethnic divide creates the pretext for what? War, invasion, annexation. That's exactly what's going on here. Okay, it's not a refugee crisis. Can we stop calling it that? It's not even really just an illegal migration situation. Again, that's part of it for sure. And yes, the supposed Spanish charity or empathy is contributing to the situation, but it's also a lot deeper than that, okay? We need to understand this is an ideological thing that is going on. The reality is, no matter how much foreign aid you give, resentment will always exist in the third world against functional civilizations that have built great things, like, for example, the European ones before they lost their minds, okay? And, no amount of your charity is going to make them not hate you. In fact, they only look at your charity and view you as basically suckers to take advantage of, because, by the way, that's how life works in the third world, right? You have places where basically everyone's fending for survival. Everyone's fending for themselves because they're shithole countries. That's the only way to put it, right? So basically, you import that mentality into the first world and you think, oh, we can integrate them. They'll be kind and gracious and act like Westerners and have high trust and those things. It's not the way it works, right? So when they see charity, they're not thinking, oh, so grateful. Thank you, sir. Wow, what a nice man. They're thinking, oh, free stuff to take advantage of, right? You need to understand, like, there's a very different mindset in the first world and the third world. People are not interchangeable, right? And this is a very real conversation that obviously a lot of left-wing characters refuse to accept, and that's how you get this current situation. They literally watch Spain be nice to them. They have this compassionate leftist government, and how they respond, oh, let's freaking invade them because they're weak. Yes, third world mindset. You're not going to change it, so stop trying. Seriously, right? You're only going to kill your own civilizations in the process of that. Anyways, updating as of tonight, by the way, if there was any speculation as to, whether these people were actually refugees or just like violent criminals and frankly, violent invaders. First night there, the mostly peaceful refugees, right? First night there, they're already starting massive riots. Yeah. I mean, what do you think was going to happen? Who do you think these people are? So yeah, at the very least, I will say I hope the mainland of Spain is watching, and this is the straw that finally breaks. Pedro Sanchez is back. I think the election is supposed to take place about next year or something. maybe let this be the crisis where it all falls apart, right? Sort of similar situation happened with Biden, so I'll keep my hopes up there. You would think in theory, by the way, that the European Union ought to get involved because, you know, theoretically, they have that migration pact. I know they usually are fining, say, Poland or right-wing countries for not taking in the refugee quota or whatever. But is this not a reverse violation of the EU migration pact, right? Because the EU didn't really plan on this. This wasn't a part of any like refugee settlement system. So you would think that the EU should step in and say, hey, this is not allowed to happen. But you know how that goes, right? They only attack the right-wing countries for not following the migration pact. When a left-wing country actually arguably breaks the migration pact by having migration that was not sanctioned by the European Union to allow to happen, right? You know, that's not going to... They never actually hold the far left countries that are also violating EU protocol accountable. But, you know, I don't know. I just hope this moment is one of many wake-up calls that I guess people need, right? Show the scenes everywhere. And tie it directly, again, this is what happens when you vote for leftists, okay? And to Americans, this is America if Trump is not president, okay? So it really is that simple. And you might say that's a false binary. I know there's all these right-wingers now who like to be pseudo-intellectuals and say, well, I'm actually against Trump for enlightened right-wing reasons. He's not conservative enough or something. No, the functional reality of that, folks, is if Kamala won the election and if Trump were not president right now, this would be the scene at the border. Why is our border completely quiet as of late under his presidency? That's the reason why. So you can sit there and say, oh, there's not enough deportations or something. And look, I agree, okay? But we've explained many times it's not really as easy as people pretend as it is, right? It's a process that takes time. But, you know, just understand, like, there is kind of a binary choice. Either you elect patriots who do the best they can and at least don't have this happening at the border, or this is the border every single day. Because, you know, these scenes seem oddly nostalgic to a time. Was that a couple years ago? Yeah. And by the way, last reminder, again, also if you support Amnesty, looking at you, by the way, that handful of rhino Republicans in Congress who want to pass an amnesty bill in the name of compassionate conservatism or something, you know, that's also this. This is also compassionate conservatism. Like, you keep that in mind. Yeah, it's being done by leftists. But if you're going to be a useful idiot for them and support the same policy, then this is it. This is what it does, right? People, they're not grateful for your decision. They see you, again, this is the third world mindset. They see you as something that can be taken advantage of because they are living in a fashion that is primitive and based entirely on survival, not higher codes of Western ethics or anything like that, okay? So when you hand them compassion, when you hand them so-called empathy, they're not going to sit there and think, oh, wow, what a nice person. These people are so nice. No, they're fending for survival. Anyways, that said, guys, let me know your thoughts. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. And until next time, God bless and peace.